kind of give a lay of the land here this afternoon. I will first proceed with my opening statement, then I will call upon our ranking member, Senator Cantwell, to make hers. After Senator Cantwell has concluded her remarks, we will hear from our colleagues, the Montana senators, Senator Daines and Senator Tester. Thank you both. Senator Tester, of course, Senator Daines, of course, is on the committee here, and Senator Tester, it's good to have you join us as well. They will introduce our distinguished witness and the other member of the Montana delegation, Representative Ryan Zinke. And after the introductions, as is the committee's longstanding practice with nominees, I will then swear in the witness, ask him 3 questions that we address to all nominees at confirmation hearings. So that's how we will proceed this afternoon. I think it's important for us all to recognize that we also have a vote that is scheduled at about 4:15, and so that will cause a little bit of an interruption, but we do want to try to move as expeditiously through this hearing as we can. Before I proceed, I'd like to recognize an individual who is well known to this committee room, and that's the former chairman of the Energy Committee, former Senator Frank Murkowski, who I happen to know well. It's good to have him back. A little bit of favoritism there, but it's good to have you here as well. I'd also like to welcome the new members to our committee. We have 3 new members, and we're pleased to have the new senator from Nevada, Ms. Cortez Masto, welcome, as well as the new senator, the junior senator from Illinois, Senator Duckworth. It's good to have you as part of the committee. And Senator Sessions has also joined the committee. As we know, he's a little bit busy right now on some other issues, but we do have 3 new members, and we welcome them. Our first hearing of the new year, a new Congress, a new administration, and I hope it will also be a new era for the Department of the Interior. I'd like to thank you, Congressman Zinke, for being here. Yours has really been a life of service to our country, from your more than 2 decades as a Navy SEAL to your time as a member of the House of Representatives. And then, of course, most recently, you have answered the call to continue your public work as a cabinet secretary for our next president. Now, we have just begun to get to know one another here since the president-elect announced his intention to nominate you. I've appreciated the conversations that we have had, and I look forward to continuing them in this more formal setting here today. And as you learn more about each of the states that are touched by the Department of Interior, I particularly appreciate your efforts to understand how and why Alaska is unique among them. Now, to state that Alaska has had a difficult or a tenuous relationship with the outgoing administration is probably more than an understatement. Instead of seeing us as the state of Alaska, our current president and secretary seem to see us as Alaska, the National Park and Wildlife Refuge, a broad, expansive wilderness with little else of interest or value. We've lost access to lands and to waters that even President Carter had promised us would be open to us. We've had our long-standing right to manage wildlife within our borders ripped away. We've seen projects halted through the delay or the denial of vital permits. For 8 years, it seemed that this administration has taken the approach that Alaska has to be protected from Alaskans, and they've acted accordingly. The restrictions that we face in resource development are almost unbelievable at times. Through the Interior Department, the Obama administration has attempted to ban energy development in nearly all of the Beaufort and the Chukchi Seas. It's withdrawn tens of thousands of square miles of water outside of those 2 areas. It's attempted to convert the non-wilderness 1002 area in our coastal plain in Anwar, which was set aside by Congress for its energy potential, into de facto wilderness. It's canceled lease sales, closed half of our National Petroleum Reserve, and imposed costly extra legal mitigation requirements. And it goes on and on and on, and we've had an opportunity to talk about that. The Obama administration has repeatedly violated or sought to evade our No More clause. It has rewritten management plans to cut off economic activities and other reasonable uses of public lands. It's deprived of us of an opportunity, but offered nothing in return, not even to Alaska Native villages that are threatened because of climate change. And this reaches all the way out to King Cove, where our current secretary rejected a short, one-lane, gravel, non-commercial use road needed to protect the health and safety of nearly 1,000 Alaskans. Without that road, we've seen 55 medevacs over the past 3 years alone, including recently an elderly Aleut woman who had a hip fracture. She was forced to wait more than 40 hours for help to arrive. And while Alaska may be the poster child, the reality is that our state is not alone in having suffered at the hands of the Interior Department. With little regard for local concern and opposition, the President has designated more land and water as national monuments than the previous 18 presidents combined. Landscape level planning, a term that sounds pretty reasonable, is another example of a strategy that has been used to reduce the influence of local areas so that someone sitting here in Washington, D.C. can tell someone living in 40 Mile, Alaska or Blanding, Utah, what their life is going to look like. And of course, Congressman Zinke, this is the Interior Department that you are walking into. And I'm counting on you, as many Alaskans are, and I think many Americans are, to come in and help fix it. I know that you're a Navy man, so excuse the expression, but we hope the cavalry is on the way. And I've got a list of some things that I think can be done to improve the situation. We need an Interior Department that fully understands the commitments made to Alaska and that abides by them, particularly our No More clause. We need the department to recognize that individuals such as John Sturgeon, what they go through when agencies like the Park Service overreach into our lives. We need the department to restore public access to public lands, to allow us restore throughput in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. We need a department that will lift decades-old public lands orders that no longer serve any purpose other than to allow the federal government to control more of Alaska, and that will prioritize the cleanup of contaminated lands and legacy wells. In Alaska, which has 223 million federal acres, but just 1/4% of its land in private ownership. Again, we got 223 million federal acres, 1/4% of land in private ownership. So Interior must recognize the importance of land transfers and land exchanges. We've got promises that have been made to our state at statehood that remain unfulfilled. Promises made pursuant to ANCSA, promises made to our Native veterans. So know that ensuring that our federal government honors those commitments to Alaskans remains one of my highest priorities. We also need a department that will rely on the expertise of the state and do more to address our needs, from volcanic monitoring to mineral mapping within its budget. And that's a lot on its own. But if you are confirmed, you will also inherit an array of problems and challenges that are much broader in scope. The Park Service reports it has an $11.3 billion maintenance backlog, meaning that even while some remain intent on acquiring more federal land, we're not properly taking care of what we already have. The U.S. affiliated islands, the territories like the Northern Marianas and the freely associated states like Palau, have issues ranging from worker visas to compact agreements that cannot be forgotten either. And then there's the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Whether we are discussing tribal courts, education, infrastructure, or development, we must work together to improve and empower our Native communities. And that begins with meaningful consultation with tribes, which is a legal requirement that the outgoing administration has often failed to meet. So finally, Congressman Zinke, if you are confirmed, I expect we will work together in a manner that is thoughtful and reflective of a true partnership. And I hope that you'll be able to show that the Interior Department is capable of working with rather than against local stakeholders to achieve good results. I think in the conversations that we have had, you've shared a vision of how the department will look under your direction. We both know that that will take hard work and close cooperation with this committee to fulfill your vision. But that work is well worth it for all of us who truly care about our public lands, who want to see them managed well, and who want the public to have access to them, whether for rock climbing or gold mining or energy development. Cantwell, for your comments.
Thank you, Chairwoman Murkowski, and welcome to the former Chair, Frank Murkowski. Welcome to the new members of the committee, particularly on our side of the aisle, Senator Duckworth and Senator Cortez Masto. Thank you for being willing to serve on this committee. I look forward to seeing Mr. Sessions, Senator Sessions on the committee. I don't know. We'll leave that for another day's discussion. And our two colleagues here, thank you for coming to support the nomination of your colleague who has been nominated by the President-elect to be the Secretary of Interior. I'll give you my congratulations on that nomination when we get to the Q&A. But today, we're here to discuss the Office of Secretary of Interior as one of the most important offices of the federal government because it oversees our national parks, wildlife refuge, public lands, and it is responsible for protecting our nation's trust responsibility to Indian country and, as the Chair mentioned, to insular areas that frankly get very little attention here and deserve more attention. The Secretary is also responsible for much of the nation's onshore and offshore mineral resources, and it also manages the water resources in western states, responsible for our nation's hydro system, something that Senator Wyden and I are very keen on, as well as our colleague from Nevada. It is a far-reaching portfolio, and it is growing and very much impacts our economy. One of the main responsibilities of the Secretary of Interior is overseeing our national parks. The park system includes 417 areas covering more than 84 million acres in every state with an annual operating budget of almost $3 billion and has more than 20,000 employees. But it is also America's treasure, our national parks, and they drive an outdoor economy that provides over 6.1 million jobs and $646 billion in annual revenue. So never underestimate the value of public land when it comes to recreation. Last year was the 100th anniversary of our national parks. And while we passed a very modest improvement to our national parks, I believe our 100-year celebration deserves more, and I look forward to asking the nominee if he agrees with me on that. Americans want us to do more to invest in these crown jewels by providing jobs and recreational opportunities, and something I know we all can agree on, fixing the maintenance backlog. One of the successes that the Senate had last Congress was passing a bipartisan legislation preserving our special places through a bipartisan Land and Water Conservation Fund legislation. And I believe that Congressman Zinke will have a chance to discuss this in his testimony, but I'm sure as an avid sportsman, he knows the value of our public lands and was enthusiastic about us trying to come up with bipartisan legislation to fix the Land and Water Conservation Fund. My constituents want to know, with the new administration, are these public lands going to face an unbelievable attack by those who would like to take these public lands away from us and turn them over back to states? Or are we going to continue to manage these resources for the incredible investment they are and continue to improve so we can get even more economic return? A second major responsibility of the Department of Interior is the management of resource extraction. Over 260 million surface acres, 700 million subsurface acres, and 1.7 billion OCS, outer continental shelf. So today's hearing is about determining whether the nominee is committed to making sure that we minimize environmental harm, that we pay for cleanup, and that we have one fundamental principle that continues to be, and that is that polluters pay. There is and continues to be an opportunity for us to ensure that these public policies, according to the Government Accountability Office, are getting a fair return for the American taxpayer. We have seen over time problems in the fossil fuel program and Interior that, as GAO has said, cost over $200 million a year in lost revenue. The Obama administration took important steps to try to fix these problems. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010 exposed the consequences of failing to have these kinds of regulations. And so The disaster caused us to put in major reforms at the Department of Interior to make sure important oversight and regulations were not pushed aside and that we monitored these programs. I would have to say that the coal program is one that needs continued focus and attention, and we'll have a chance to talk about this today. The Obama administration has adopted rules to ensure a fair return to taxpayers for our national mineral resources, requiring everyone to pay for mitigation for the damages that they cause. Just today, the Government Accountability Office announced a new conclusion after reviewing multiple types of energy and natural resources. The GAO found that coal mining alone gets a very special treatment in the ability to have bonding for reclamation requirements. Everyone else, oil and gas producers, wind, solar, and even hard rock miners, have to post and cash a third-party bond to make sure that they can clean up the financial surety of the pollution that would be caused. This is something that needs to be addressed by the agency, and I would hope that our nominee would address this. Today's hearing also affords Congressman Zinke the opportunity to demonstrate how he will uphold the trust and treaty obligations to 567 federally recognized tribes. This includes overseeing the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Indian education and a $2.5 billion budget in Indian country. The reason, Madam Chair, I will take just a minute on this particular point is that our colleagues, many of who serve on this committee, also serve on Indian Affairs, will not have the same chance to point these important issues out to the nominee. But clearly, these issues of stewardship as it relates to tribal lands, support for tribal education, social services, and infrastructure, I think regardless of the side of the aisle you sit on, you will hear many things from people both on Indian Affairs and Energy Committee about how important these issues are to the constituents that we represent. It is also critical we understand the nominee's commitment to carrying out our obligations in insular affairs, and as the chair mentioned, there are many issues that we will get to in the Q&A, but I would like to bring up a few issues as it relates to the Pacific Northwest. There are issues where climate has caused greater impacts on both drought and fire damage. This committee has taken bipartisan efforts to move forward on both of those issues, collaborative efforts to make sure in both Washington and Oregon we are doing all that we can to plan for better resource management of our water supply and build capacity for the future. And we have reached consensus here in the Senate as well on ways to stop fire borrowing and move forward on what are fuel reduction policies that would better serve our federal public lands. I would also mention of particular importance to all of us in the Pacific Northwest, the important pending reauthorization or recommitment of the Columbia River Treaty, the management of our federal hydro system between the United States and Canada needs a lot of attention and direction, and we hope that we'll have a chance to ask you questions about that as well. So thank you, Madam Chair. I again congratulate the nominee and look forward to hearing from him and his wife, and I'm here and meeting his family as he makes his introduction.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. We will now turn to the Montana senators for introduction of a nominee, and recognizing your seat on the committee here, Senator Daines, we will turn to you and then hear from Senator Tester to introduce the nominee to be Secretary of the Interior. Senator Daines.
Madam Chair Murkowski, Ranking Member Cantwell, thank you. It is truly my great honor to introduce a fellow Montanan, an American hero, and a good friend of mine, Congressman Ryan Zinke, and support his confirmation to the position of Interior Secretary of our new President, Donald J. Trump. Notice you have the entire Montana congressional delegation before you today. We have both the Montana senators, one who is a Republican and one who is a Democrat. You know, I first met Ryan in 1979, and we were both high school students growing up in Montana. In fact, we were in Dillon, Montana for Boys State. Ryan from Whitefish High School, and I was representing Bozeman High School. He was captain of the soon-to-be undefeated state champion Whitefish Bulldogs football team. He was also president of his class. After high school, Ryan went on to the University of Oregon, where he was a full scholarship starting athlete for the Oregon Ducks, their football team, where he would win numerous awards for outstanding academic as well as athletic performance. And he majored in geology. It's a subject matter that I know has served him well in serving the people of Montana. And then Ryan enlisted in the United States Navy. Ryan Zinke is a U.S. Navy SEAL commander whose assignments include the elite SEAL Team 6, and part of that tenure was serving under General Mattis as commander of Joint Special Forces in Iraq at the height of insurgent activity. I would like to highlight Ryan's experience as a SEAL because Navy SEALs never quit. They don't know the definition of the word because they never do. Navy SEALs also don't fail. They die trying. And it's that work ethic that Ryan Zinke brings with him to every mission he takes, whether it's in the military, in the United States Congress, or at the Department of Interior. During his 23 years of service as a SEAL, Ryan conducted special operations on 4 continents. He trained and mentored thousands of men and women, and he made sure our troops were as prepared and as safe as absolutely possible when conducting these no-fail missions around the globe. He was also the guy who the Navy called upon to go into units and see how they could be improved. Whether it was looking at new advancements in technology so our special forces could invade new landscapes undetected by the enemy, or reviewing existing processes and implementing new policies that our ground force commanders and headquarters could communicate more efficiently during combat, Ryan Zinke has always been a trusted leader of the most demanding missions, and it will be no different at the Department of Interior. As the deputy and acting commander of Joint Special Forces in Iraq in 2004, Ryan led a combined force of special operators through the streets of Fallujah as the forward commander at the height of insurgent terrorist activity in what can only be described, and I quote, as a warehouse of death. Ryan was charged with implementing a strategy utilizing tens of thousands of personnel, both military and civilian, to advance our mission. And he coordinated with other branches, nations, and government agencies to achieve diplomatic and military missions. Ryan earned 2 Bronze Stars and many other awards for his service to our great nation. We should also be thankful to his wife, Lola, and their children for their service. And I might add, apples don't fall far from the tree. Ryan's daughter, who's sitting beside him, was a Navy diver. His son-in-law is also a Navy SEAL. Following his retirement from the Navy, after 23 years of honorable service to our nation, Ryan came back to Montana and he continued to serve because Ryan ran for and he won a seat in our state Senate and then as Montana's sole representative of the United States House. In fact, he was the first Navy SEAL ever elected to the U.S. Congress. Ryan has been a strong supporter of conservationists as well as responsible natural resource development and increased recreation access on our public lands. You see, Ryan grew up 30 minutes from Glacier National Park. I grew up 60 minutes from Yellowstone National Park. We both understand the importance of our national parks. In fact, Ryan and I have shared a McKinsey boat together, fly fishing on one of Montana's many blue ribbon trout streams. Ryan is intimately familiar with the vast jurisdiction of the Department of Interior because he's lived it. He has seen his own hometown suffer due to bad government policies that hurt rural communities like Libby, like Malta, like Colstrip, that depend on our public land access. After all, Ryan is a born and bred Montanan who knows that we must strike that right balance between conservation and responsible energy development. And he understands that a one-size-fits-all policies, like we see coming from Washington, D.C., never work for real America. Ryan Zinke is smart. He's got Montana horse sense. He's the guy you want in your corner whether you're fighting in the streets of Fallujah for your life or fighting on the floor of Congress for your livelihood. He listens and he fights for what he believes in. I have no doubt he will be a fighter for America, for our public lands, as the next Secretary of the Interior. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Daines. Appreciate your comments and sharing all that with us. Senator Tester, thank you for joining us here at the committee. And please, if you will, proceed with your introductions.
It indeed is a pleasure, and I want to thank you, Chairwoman Murkowski and Ranking Member Cantwell, distinguished members of this committee, for allowing me to be here today, because it is an honor today to participate. To introduce a decorated Navy veteran and fellow public servant, lucky enough to represent the people of the great state of Montana, the Treasure State, the last best place. Before our time here, both Congressman Zinke and I had the pleasure of serving in the Montana Senate, albeit not at the same time. So I want to thank him again for answering the call to serve our great nation. I believe it is very important for someone who knows the West to serve as Interior Secretary. The job of Interior Secretary is incredibly important, especially today as America's public lands come under attack by folks who want individual states to manage them, which is the first step to selling off our public lands to the highest bidder. It falls on this committee to ask Congressman Zinke specific questions about how he views the responsibilities of Interior Secretary and how he will push back on this administration with his perspective, his Montana perspective, whenever necessary. Things like public lands, keeping public lands in public hands for our kids and our grandkids, a very important issue at this moment in time. Things like the deferred maintenance and backlog wreaking havoc on our national park system. Things like Land and Water Conservation Fund, how to work with Congress and this administration to ensure full and devoted funding to the initiatives like that visionary LWCF, Land and Water Conservation Fund. As the chairwoman pointed out, things like trust responsibilities in Indian country, and the ranking member as well, for America's sovereign Indian nations. And of course, resource development, how to responsibly manage our public lands for energy and resource development, and how to balance that with respect to clean water and clean air and wildlife and the habitat that supports them. I am particularly encouraged by Congressman's support for protecting the gateway to Yellowstone National Park. Just recently, when a mining company proposed to drill just a few miles from the doorstep of this nation's first national park, the Congressman joined me and local businesses and community leaders to protect our outdoor economy. Of course, there are issues that the Congressman and I don't see eye to eye, but if he provides you with the answers that he has provided to me, I expect you will find that he is well equipped to hold this post with accountability. As a Westerner, I know what's at stake. So I am honored to introduce Congressman Zinke to this committee. I trust that a Navy SEAL, as always, will shoot straight. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator Tester. Thank you both for being here and providing that introduction for our nominee. And with that, Representative Zinke, if you will come forward. And before asking you to begin your opening statement and introduce your family, I will ask that we proceed with administering the oath, which is customary in hearings such as this one, and then I'm going to ask 3 questions, again, customary to operation within this committee. So the rules of the committee, which apply to all nominees, require that they be sworn in connection with their testimony. So please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Before you begin your statement, I will ask you 3 questions that we address to each nominee before the committee. Will you be available to appear before the committee and other congressional committees to represent departmental positions and respond to issues of concern to the Congress?
I will.
Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that would constitute a conflict or create an appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you have been nominated by the President?
Madam Chairman, my investments, personal holdings and other interests have been reviewed by both myself and the appropriate ethics counselors within the federal government. I've taken all appropriate action to avoid any conflicts of interest, and there are no conflicts of interest or appearances thereof to my knowledge.
Thank you. And final question, are you involved or do you have any assets that are held in blind trust?
I do not.
Thank you, Representative Zinke. You may proceed with introduction of family and your opening statements, but welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Cantwell, and members of the committee. And thank you also, Montana Senators Tester and Daines, for their kind remarks, leadership, and continued service on behalf of our great treasured state. It is an honor to appear before this esteemed Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Before beginning my remarks, I'd like to introduce and recognize my members of the family who have joined me today. My wife, Lolita, who is also a member of the President's-elect Hispanic Advisory Committee, the Council, Lola. My two grandchildren, Matilda and Charlotte. My daughter, Jennifer, and her husband, Jack. And for the record, I did tell my daughter, don't join the Navy and don't marry a Navy SEAL, and she did both. My sons, Wolfgang and Conrad, are back at school and hopefully studying today, so they will not be with us. Well, as a son of a plumber and a kid who grew up in a small timber town and railroad town in Whitefish near Glacier Park, I am humbled to be before you as a President-elect designee for Secretary of Interior. I'm also deeply humbled because of the great responsibility the position holds to be the steward of our majestic lands, the champion of our great Indian nations, and the manager and voice of our diverse wildlife. Up front, I am an unapologetic admirer of Teddy Roosevelt and believe he had it right when he placed under federal protection millions of our acres of federal lands and set aside much of it as our national forest. Today, those lands provide Americans the opportunity to hike, fish, camp, recreate, and enjoy the great outdoors. It was on these lands that my father taught me to hunt and fish, and the Boy Scouts taught me the principles of environmental stewardship and the importance of public access. It is also on these lands that many communities, like the community I grew up in, rely on to harvest timber, mine, and provide our nation with critical energy. Without question, our public lands are America's treasures and are rich in diversity. I fully recognize and appreciate there are lands that deserve special recognition and are better managed under the John Muir model of wilderness, where man has a light touch and is an observer. I also fully recognize that the preponderance of our federal holdings are better suited under the Pinchot model of multiple use, using best practices, sustainable policies, and objective science. During my recent centennial, or during the recent centennial of our National Park Service, I found myself at a ceremony at Yellowstone National Park, our first national park, established by Congress and signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant on March 1st, 1872. As I enjoyed the celebration of the famous Roosevelt Arch, I could not help but notice the words etched on the stone above, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. I also could not help but notice on the plaque on the side, said erected by Congress. When I saw that, I thought this is the perfect policy of land that our great nation should uphold. In order to have great deeds and accomplish great things, both sides have to work together. Higher purpose can only be achieved by both sides coming together for higher purpose. In a nutshell, that's my commitment to you. If confirmed, I'll work with each of you to ensure that our public lands reflect higher purpose so that our children's children, my granddaughter's children, can look back and say we did it right. I've almost met every member of this committee and I understand that each state is different. I also understand that issues within your state are different and you have different priorities. But I'm confident that we can work together to get the job done. When asked about what my goals might be, I would say there are 3 immediate tasks. The first is to restore trust and working with rather than against local communities and states. I fully recognize that there is distrust, anger, and even hatred against some federal management policies. Being a listener and a listening advocate rather than a deaf adversary is a good start. Second is to prioritize the estimated $12.5 billion in backlog of maintenance and repair of our national parks. The President-elect is committed to a jobs and infrastructure bill, and I am committed and need your help in making sure that bill includes our national treasures. And third, to ensure that the professionals in the front line, that's our managers and rangers, have the right tools, the right resources, and the flexibility to make the right decisions to give a voice to the people they represent. As a former Montana State Senator and current Congressman, I've learned a lot since I was a SEAL in the deserts of Iraq. To accomplish my mission as Secretary of Interior, if confirmed, I know that I'm going to need your help, I'm going to need your confidence, and even perhaps your prayers. I look forward to answering your questions, and if confirmed, representing the interests of our great nation and giving a voice to all Americans, to include our great Indian nations, on how we manage, sustain our public lands, and the treasures they contain. Madam Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you in this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Congressman Zinke.